Right now, there are highly trained police detectives
Mm.
who are dealing with internet crimes against children, and they are suffering from profound clinical PTSD.
Yeah, the rates are just staggering.
Right. But the thing is, they have never been in a physical shootout. They haven't been in high-speed chases. They're getting traumatized simply by sitting in windowless rooms, reading chat logs, and watching how quietly and how patiently predators just dismantle the human mind.
The sheer volume of these cases, and that psychological toll it takes on the people investigating them, it completely shifts our understanding of where danger actually comes from.
Exactly. So welcome to today's deep dive. Today, we're looking at exactly how these predators operate, and more importantly, how you can build a flawless defense architecture against them.
Right.
We are pulling this from some incredibly sobering source material, specifically the work of Darren Ryan. He's a former UK police detective, and we're looking at his book, Lifeline.
Yes, his background is in ICE, that's the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Forces.
Right. And his research really forces us to move away from the idea of physical security. Locking your deadbolt or checking a camera feed. It moves us into the invisible structural world of psychological security.
It's a totally different landscape.
It is. So consider today a vital clinical firewall check for your operational zone at home and in your community.
Darren Ryan's analysis in Lifeline brings this massive, necessary shift in how we understand the threat model. I mean, he fundamentally shatters the stranger danger myth that most of us were raised to fear.
You mean the idea of the guy waiting in a dark alley?
Right.
Or like the movie villain snatching someone off the street?
Yeah, exactly. That is rarely how it happens. The data shows that predators, well, they do not operate in the shadows. They are integrators.
Integrators, okay.
Yeah, they systematically and patiently insert themselves into a victim's daily routine. They build a foundation of trust.
Wow.
I mean, they might spend 6 months just asking about a victim's special interests online. They become this comforting fixture in their life long before they ever make a single malicious move.
Okay, let's unpack that target selection process then. Because if they aren't hiding in alleys and they're basically walking right through the front door disguised as a friend, how do they choose who to integrate with?
That's the key question.
Right, because they certainly aren't just pulling names out of a hat.
No, absolutely not. The selection is highly opportunistic. When we look at the criminology and psychology data, there is a known systemic risk here.
Okay.
Predators disproportionately target individuals with developmental differences, particularly autistic adults.
Wow. Okay.
But it's vital to understand they aren't just looking for a specific medical label or an age bracket. They are conducting a scan.
It's exactly like a hacker running an automated script across a computer network.
Yes, that is exactly it.
When a hacker wants to breach a system, they don't care if you have a Dell or a Mac. They're just scanning the entire network looking for machines running outdated software.
Right.
They're looking for an open port or a configuration error, just a specific vulnerability in the system that allows for easy exploitation without triggering any alarms.
That analogy perfectly captures the methodology here. Predators are scanning for vulnerabilities in the hardware, so to speak, and the societal programming of the individual.
Okay.
They view the specific processing styles and the social conditioning of autistic individuals, well, not as human differences to be respected. They view them as mechanical exploits to be leveraged.
That is chilling.
It really is. And our sources break down this hacking process into 3 specific psychological vulnerabilities.
So to understand how a predator breaches the perimeter, we really have to look at what they offer first. Because they aren't offering danger. They're offering a fake solution to a very real, very deep deficit.
Which brings us to the first tactic in the vulnerability matrix. This is the validation exploit.
The validation exploit?
Right. Predators actively seek out individuals who have a history of profound social isolation or neglect, or just a lifetime of feeling fundamentally misunderstood by the world around them.
Basically a system that is completely starved for authentic connection.
Precisely. The predator identifies this isolated target, and they initiate a mechanism known as love bombing.
Right, I've heard that term.
Yeah, they overwhelm the victim with artificial attention. They offer excessive praise, constant validation, and this totally fabricated sense of belonging.
Wow.
They flood the victim's system with exactly the emotional input it has been missing for years.
Because the individual has literally been walking through an emotional desert their entire life.
Yeah.
And the predator just shows up with a gallon of cold water.
That's a great way to put it. And the psychological response is immediate. Because the victim is so starved for validation, they naturally form this incredibly intense, rapid loyalty to the person providing it.
Right.
And from a mechanical standpoint, that loyalty is the predator's golden ticket. It grants them administrative access to the victim's life.
Okay, wait, I need to push back on the mechanics of this
Sure.
because this feels incredibly tricky for you, the listener, especially if you're a parent or a caregiver.
It is tricky.
Right, like if my isolated kid finally finds a friend who showers them with praise, who actually wants to talk to them all the time about their favorite video game or hobby, I'm going to be thrilled.
Of course you are.
I'm going to be so relieved. I am not going to immediately think, oh no, a validation exploit. So how is a parent supposed to look at someone being genuinely nice and recognize a predator?
That is exactly what makes this the most insidious tactic. The malicious intent is hiding completely inside seemingly positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
But the distinction you're looking for lies in three factors: speed, intensity, and isolation.
Speed, intensity, isolation.
Okay. A genuine friend builds trust slowly over time. They have their own life, and they encourage the individual to maintain other relationships. A predator executing the validation exploit moves at an unnatural speed. The amount of praise and attention is just wildly disproportionate to how long they've known each other.
So it's a sudden avalanche of attention, not a steady, normal build.
Exactly. And then comes the isolation phase. Very quickly, the predator begins to position themselves as the only person who truly understands the victim. You'll see them start to subtly undermine the victim's parents or their therapists or their other friends. They create this dynamic of us against the world. That is the massive red flag.
Okay, so the predator has used this artificial validation to gain trust. But as we know, trust isn't their end goal. Control is the goal.
Always.
And to get control, to extract whatever it is they want from the victim, they have to start crossing lines. They have to start pushing boundaries.
Right.
And that is where they should run into a roadblock. That is where the victim's internal alarm system should start blaring.
It should, yes.
But the real tragedy here is that society has often dismantled those alarms long before the predator ever showed up.
This is what the sources identify as the second major vulnerability, the compliance glitch.
The compliance glitch. Walk us through the underlying psychology of this glitch. How exactly does society turn off the alarms?
We really have to look at how many autistic individuals are raised and conditioned. From a very young age, they are frequently taught to comply above all else.
Right.
They are explicitly and implicitly instructed to conform to neurotypical rules, to obey authority figures without question, and to meet these arbitrary social demands simply to fit in.
Right. They're constantly told that their natural way of existing is wrong.
Yeah.
And they need to modify it to make the people around them more comfortable.
Exactly. They are conditioned to mask their own discomfort. If an environment is overwhelmingly loud or, a hug from a relative feels physically uncomfortable, the societal training dictates that they must endure it quietly.
Wow.
The underlying message they receive constantly is, do not cause a scene, do not be difficult. So predators weaponize this deeply ingrained compliance. They slowly push boundaries. They do things that make the victim uncomfortable because they are banking on the fact that the victim has been conditioned their entire life to prioritize the happiness of others over their own safety.
This is a profound and frankly infuriating realization for anyone listening.
It really is.
I mean, the predator didn't install this glitch. Our communities, our schools, and sometimes even our own families install this glitch.
Yes.
By forcing autistic individuals to constantly mask their true selves, by demanding compliance just to make neurotypical society feel more at ease, we inadvertently train them not to fight back when they are in danger.
It is a devastating system failure. We are programming them to ignore their own physiological warning signs. We tell them your discomfort is less important than being polite.
God, yeah.
So when the predator initiates an uncomfortable interaction, the victim complies. They don't fight back because they believe they're just supposed to endure it, just like they endure everything else.
It's the perfect storm for a predator. The victim is isolated, starved for affection, and basically trained never to say no.
Right.
But let's say the victim does feel that discomfort. Let's say the boundary violation is severe enough that the internal alarm really tries to go off. They still have to recognize the threat for what it is.
Yes, and that brings us to the third exploit. And this one relies entirely on how the victim decodes communication.
Right.
The sources refer to this as social naivety, or more accurately, literal social processing.
Literal process.
Yeah.
Right.
Predators utilize a massive amount of subtext, They use double meanings, incredibly subtle manipulations, implied threats.
Okay.
But the autistic brain often processes communication in a highly literal manner. They rely on the surface-level data being presented in the interaction.
They process the words exactly as they're defined without scanning for that hidden agenda.
Exactly. So if a predator makes a gesture that, literally speaking, appears friendly or protective, the individual might process it purely as a nice gesture.
Right.
They miss the unspoken red flags, the slight shift in tone, the lingering physical proximity, or just the contextual inappropriateness of the request.
Wow.
The malicious intent is hidden entirely in the subtext. And if your brain's processing style doesn't naturally scan for subtext, the threat goes completely undetected.
Let's ground this in a real-world scenario. Think about how a sophisticated phishing email works,
Great example.
right? If you process a phishing email, literally, what do you see? You see the logo of your bank. You see polite professional language. It says, dear valued customer, please verify your account details to help us keep your money safe.
Right. It looks totally fine.
The literal text is incredibly helpful. It looks like a friendly customer service gesture. But if you can't read the hidden malicious intent in the underlying HTML code, if you can't see the invisible script designed to steal your identity, you will just hand over your passwords.
And to give a human example of that exact dynamic, imagine a predator telling a young autistic adult, hey, let's keep our friendship our special secret so your parents don't get jealous of how much time we spend together.
Oh, wow.
A neurotypical brain hears that subtext and immediately flags it as grooming. It screams danger.
Right.
But a literally processing autistic brain might process the surface data and think, oh, this person wants to protect my parents' feelings. That is a very thoughtful and kind thing to do.
They click the link.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They don't see the invisible threat code running in the background until the system is already compromised.
Oh, we have mapped a truly terrifying landscape today. I mean, we've looked at the validation exploit, the tragedy of the compliance glitch, and this trap of literal processing.
It's heavy.
Sitting with this reality, thinking about the ISACAT detectives who deal with this daily, it can feel completely overwhelming. But the mission of this deep dive isn't just threat analysis.
Yeah.
We aren't here to just scare you.
No, not at all.
We are here to talk about operational defense. Because these vulnerabilities, these psychological exploits, they require a very specific environment to actually function.
Which means you, the listener, have the power to change that environment. You have the ability to patch these vulnerabilities before a predator ever runs a scan on your family.
Let's shift from theory into daily habits then. The source material outlines a countermeasure we're going to call the abundance defense.
Yes.
And this is where we basically take the power away from the predators entirely.
Think back to the validation exploit. Predators absolutely rely on the victim living in a broken system. They need the victim to be suffering from isolation, low self-esteem, chronic invalidation.
Right.
That emotional void is the open door that allows the predator to swoop in and play the hero. They need a vacuum so they can fill it.
So the abundance defense is about eliminating the vacuum.
Precisely. The ultimate countermeasure is the daily operational protocol you establish at home and in your close circle. The abundance defense dictates that vulnerable individuals must receive strong, high-integrity validation from their trusted network.
Okay, but what does that actually look like on a Tuesday night at the dinner table?
Good question.
It means creating a genuine architecture of safety. It means giving individuals defined, meaningful roles in the family, treating them as vital, indispensable components of your household.
Right.
It means actively and consistently making them feel incredibly valued for exactly who they are, without demanding they mask their traits or comply with arbitrary, uncomfortable norms just to earn your affection.
And doing that creates an impenetrable mental system. If a predator approaches someone who is completely fulfilled, someone who is deeply validated by their family and community, and tries to offer them artificial praise, the exploit just fails.
Yeah.
The individual's internal system will immediately flag it as suspicious. Because they aren't starving for attention, they can look at the offer objectively and say, well, why is the stranger acting so intensely? I already know my worth. My family tells me my worth every single day.
So the predator's bad code gets immediately rejected at the perimeter.
Exactly.
And this completely neutralizes the compliance glitch too.
Yeah.
And if your daily family habits encourage the individual to vocalize their discomfort, if you teach them from a young age that their physical and emotional boundaries are respected and that they never have to endure discomfort just to keep the peace,
Yes.
then when a predator tries to push a boundary, the individual will immediately sound the alarm. They will fight back, loudly because their trusted circle hasn't trained them to stay quiet.
Understanding the underlying psychology of these threats is exactly what removes the fear. You don't have to live in a state of generalized panic, jumping at shadows in an alley. You replace that anxiety with actionable, specific family habits. Safety is not about locking someone away in a tower. Isolation is actually the vulnerability.
Right. True safety is about robust mental architecture. It's about creating an abundant home environment that renders external manipulation basically mathematically impossible.
Precisely.
By staying aware of how predators operate and by saturating your trusted circle with high-integrity validation, you ensure that no malicious script ever makes it through.
And that requires a daily, active commitment from the people closest to the individual.
Which brings me back to where we started. We talked about how physical security is easy to understand. You lock a deadbolt, you check a camera, you feel safe.
Yeah.
Psychological security is invisible, but it is just as structural, and it requires just as much intentional maintenance. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, something that really builds on everything we've unpacked today about how we protect our most vulnerable.
It is the most crucial takeaway for anyone listening who wants to make a tangible difference.
If high-integrity validation at home acts as a literal security firewall, it fundamentally changes how we view our daily family dynamics. What happens to the broader community's security posture if we stop viewing making someone feel valued as just a nice, polite social gesture, and we start treating it as a critical, non-negotiable security protocol?
That changes everything.
Think about that. The most powerful deadbolt you can install on your front door isn't made of steel. It's made of how deeply you validate the people sitting across from you at the dinner table. Ensure your firewall is active.